Welcome to our end-to-end carbon management demo today. In this session, we will demonstrate the integration of 4 key SAP sustainability solutions into an S/4HANA system. Our starting point is our S/4HANA public cloud, where we aim to enrich existing business data with emissions data. This enhancement will enable the seamless integration of sustainability metrics into daily business transactions and financial postings. To implement this integration, we will focus on cloud-based solutions, and we will start with the Sustainability Data Exchange platform, then the SAP Sustainability Footprint Management, which is our joint development with SAP together, the Green Ledger, and last but not least, the Sustainability Control Tower. Together, these tools provide a comprehensive foundation for embedding carbon-related data into enterprise-wide processes and decision-making. To illustrate the demo case, we will take on the perspective of a company that manufactures chemical products, for example, epoxy paint. This product is widely used across various industries, including construction and automotive. Our example company operates a global supply chain with several manufacturing facilities located in 8 countries worldwide. It produces approximately 500,000 tons of various chemical products annually. The company pursues 2 main objectives in terms of carbon management. Firstly, to calculate the PCF, product carbon footprint, for semi-finished and finished goods, and secondly, to determine the CCF, corporate carbon footprint, for comprehensive sustainability reporting. For our live demo, we start in our S/4HANA public cloud system in the Managed Product Master Data application. Master data is a large part of the data required for an emissions calculation. This means that most of the data required is already in the ERP system. Here we see the master data for our raw material example today, the stabilizer. Other required data are emission factors. So let me introduce our first SAP sustainability solution, Sustainability Data Exchange. This platform enables the seamless exchange of carbon-related data with both your suppliers and your customers. Now let's consider a practical example for our chemical company. Imagine the sustainability manager requests supplier-specific emissions data for a particular product. Traditionally, this would likely trigger a manual process where the procurement team reaches out to suppliers via email to request the relevant emission factors. With SDX, however, this process becomes much more efficient. By simply using the Manage Inbound application, the procurement team can directly request and manage this data in a structured and streamlined way. For the purposes of our demo case, we've listed raw materials with 2 different suppliers. For instance, our raw material example, the stabilizer, from our supplier Innochem. As you can see, a footprint has already been provided. However, we can also verify whether the data is still valid, and if not, we can easily request an updated version directly through the platform. Let's now switch perspectives and take a look from the supplier side, in this case, Innochem. Upon receiving the request, the supplier logs into SDX where the inquiry appears as a new tile on their dashboard. In response, they confirm that the footprint has not changed and is still valid by sending an update through the platform. Now, returning to the chemical company, the procurement specialist will see the update in the SDX. By going again in the Manage Inbound application, we see that the footprint has not changed and is automatically accepted. At the same time, without any additional action required, the data is automatically also updated in the solution that the Sustainability Manager works with, the Sustainability Footprint Management. This brings us to our second SAP sustainability solution, Sustainability Footprint Management. This solution supports the calculation of both product and corporate carbon footprint, as will be demonstrated in our course of today's session. Let's begin by focusing on the product carbon footprint scenario. Within this context, the Sustainability Manager can access the Manage Supplier Footprints application to review the footprint data submitted for the stabilizer provided by InnoChem. To continue the process, the manager must release the footprint, and once it is released, it appears here in the Process Entries tab for inclusion in footprint calculations. As a brief note, in cases where specific emission factors are not provided, the system offers the option to apply AI-based mapping, which links materials to emission factors datasets such as EcoInvent. For the footprint calculation, we also need transactional data, which can be imported directly from an ERP system. At this point in our process, we have already looked at master data and emission factors. The transactional data is imported into the SFM through the Import Business Transaction application. It is possible to perform the calculations on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. Today we want to look at our calculation for the period April. Here we can see transactional data such as the goods received from supplier or internal service confirmation. This is crucial for calculating energy sources and machine running times in the production process. But let's stick with the goods received from suppliers. Here we can see a goods received from our material stabilizer of the supplier InnoChem. Within our SAP S/4HANA Public Cloud, the Material Documents Overview application provides a comprehensive list of all the material documents, including our relevant transactional data. Here we can clearly identify the goods received from the stabilizer material we have just seen in the SFM. At this point, we have all the necessary data, both master and transactional data from the connected S/4HANA system, as well as primary emission factors sourced directly from the supplier via SDX. The next step is to move into footprint calculation we have executed in SFM and review the results. The calculation in SFM are found through the application Calculate Footprints. Here we can jump directly in our relevant calculation for April 2025. Because we already have the status calculated successfully, we can have a look at our results. Here we have an overview of all of the results calculated successfully. Because we want to have it in a more structured and relevant way, we have saved here a variant, and now our results are divided into different item types. For our purposes today, we will focus on the product level and also on our production level, which is relevant if the materials were produced during the selected period. Additionally, the data can be further analyzed with using our export function to Excel. To visualize the results, we can jump into the Sankey diagram, which will give us a more detailed overview of the results. Starting again with our purchased material, the stabilizer, we can see at a glance how the CO2 data is structured. We have here the total CO2 emissions and also the amount per unit. In our case, it's kilogram. But it also provides us with a breakdown of the GHG protocol scope categories that were calculated. And additionally, it compares the emissions within these categories ranked from highest to lowest. As I mentioned earlier, we also have the item type production. And the Sankey diagram is structured like the supply value chain, allowing us to trace the journey from our received raw material to the production of a semi-finished, or in our case, the finished product, epoxide hards. While the structure remains consistent, the composition of our production process expands as additionally machine-operated scope categories are incorporated into the calculation, like for example the scope 2 purchased electricity. And to obtain a more detailed analysis, the results for each item type, the data can be viewed directly within the system, and also here we have the opportunity again to export it for further analysis. But now let's take a look at our final result for our PCF today for the epoxy paint. We have here our total emissions per piece. One piece is 10 kilograms. So we have here for 10 kilograms of epoxy paint, 267 kilogram CO2 kilograms calculated. The sustainability footprint management solution offers additional analysis options, for example, through our footprint overview application. Here we have not only an overview of our last calculations of the last 4 months, but also we have our balance sheet and additional details for the scope categories 1 to 3. And this application is linked to the other ones where we can analyze the data, for example, for the purchased products. And we can jump directly from the footprint overview in our detailed overview for the purchased product. Having analyzed and evaluated our calculated product carbon footprint, we can now use this data for other purposes. For instance, we can publish the footprints for the purchased materials, for example, into our S/4HANA system, and integrate them directly into, for example, a purchase order. Here we can see which footprints calculated can be published and already have the status published, but we can repeat this process anytime we want by simply pushing here the button Publish. Once the footprints are successfully published, we can review them in the View Product Footprints application to integrate them after with key user extensibilities in different processes. This means that the emissions data from the SFM in the past calculated are used here in the S/4HANA system as reference values in order to integrate, use, and sensitize them in day-to-day business postings such as purchasing. So let's take a look on a new created purchase order for our raw material, the stabilizer. As soon as the footprints are published to the S/4HANA system, we will have already the CO2 values visible in our documents. That brings us to our third sustainability solution, SAP Green Ledger. If we look further into the value chain of our purchased material, it will be used for the production of our end product after receipt. With SAP Green Ledger, we can seamlessly record, manage, and analyze CO2 emissions along the entire value chain, with the data being integrated into our financial processes. Using the Manage Journal Entries application, we can review postings. Here are materials listed specifically for our demo case purposes, and we want to look at the transfer for the material value posted from inventory raw material to consumption raw material, reflecting the material consumption in the production process. This is enabled through the imported material movements from our connected S/4HANA system. Another way to use the PCF is to include it in the corporate carbon footprint. Using the corporate balance application, we can visualize this data from the SFM to see at a glance how the ratios of our scope categories in terms of emissions have developed over the year. Here too, we have a detailed list of our results, which allows us to take a closer look at the emissions data, especially for scope 3 categories. You can see here categories which are not associated with the production, like for example, business travel. And for external use, we have also integrated the export function here. To go now one step further, we can publish these results to the Connected Sustainability Control Tower Solution, short SCT, which is the last part of our demo. In SAT, you can monitor, manage, and report on all sustainability-related KPIs, including those required under the CSRD. For today's session, though, we will focus on our carbon results sourced from SFM. We are now in the STT, and since the data has already been transferred from SFM, we can access the emissions dashboard via the View Emissions Dashboard application. And as you can see, the results here match exactly what we previously observed in SFM. To elevate the discussion to a more strategic level, we can switch to our Analyze ESG Data application. And this view not only provides insight into historical and current performances, but also allows us to define our future targets and assess whether we are on track to achieve them. The KPIs available here go beyond carbon and include other environmental aspects such as waste or emissions to water. And to continue our focus on carbon, let's now set a target for Scope 1 GHG emissions. We select the category and are redirected to the emissions dashboard. At the top of the screen, we have here the official EU's official KPI reporting catalog categories, which is very helpful. Looking specifically on our Scope 1 emissions, we can see that we are currently off track. While our target follows a linear reduction, our actual emissions are increasing. So let's have a closer look by selecting our location, California. And here we have the example, and here we can observe significant fluctuations, and the figures are not aligning with our target. So this indicates that further investigations would be beneficial to understand how emissions can be reduced in this region. This brings us to the end of our end-to-end demo case today. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did, and if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We are always happy to support you. Thank you for your attention.